Welcome to Transformational Pathways, a podcast created by Toastmasters District 46 in the greater New York area, where we share conversations from influencers within the Toastmasters community and people whose lives have positively transformed by walking down the Toastmasters path. Whether you're just getting started in your career, have had recent career changes, or you're navigating different languages, we're here to help you build confidence by discovering new tools, overcoming your fears to find your voice, and engaging in a thriving community. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello! Welcome to another episode of Toastmasters District 46 Transformational Pathways podcast. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and walking the pathway with me today is our guest, Jan-Paul Roodbol. Jan-Paul, you are currently the Vice President of Corporate Treasury for International Capital Management with MetLife. You have 30 years of life insurance and capital management experience with major corporations. You are the president of the MetLife Toastmasters Club, which, by the way, is a great one to attend. You're one of the charter members of District 46 new podcast club. You're the current program quality director for District 46, and you were just elected to be the director for all of District 46 starting in July. Congratulations, Jan-Paul, and welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you, Scott. After such an introduction, yes, I have 30 years of experience, and but it doesn't feel like it. I'm still learning every day.
I love that. And actually, the fact that you would choose to say that right up front goes as to some of the key things that I am very excited to talk to you about today. And I bet those that are watching or listening will really enjoy about their experience meeting you through this show. But before we get to all of that, Jan-Paul, International Capital Management, Corporate Treasury, those aren't just $5 words. Those are $25 words. What do they mean? What do you do for a living? Exactly. Explain it to us lay people.
I make sure that our policyholders can sleep at night and that management can sleep at night. As part of a bigger team, of course, we want to make sure that the regulators, so the governments all over the world where we do business, are happy with how we operate and have sufficient capital. So that's in a nutshell what the Capital Management Department does.
Awesome. I think that's totally understandable. Now, Jan-Paul, you gotta fess up for me here, and I don't think you'll deny this. You don't have a New York accent, do you?
Maybe not in New York, maybe not Brooklyn, but I've been in New York since 2011. I came to the US in 2004. And I'm originally from South Africa. I grew up there. I worked and studied there. And that's where I got my insurance legs. But I'm happy that gave me the opportunity to come to New York City.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Where in South Africa were you born and raised?
I'm from Pretoria, the capital city, which is in the center of the country. And then later I studied and worked in the wonderful, beautiful city of Cape Town.
Oh. And what was life like there? What was it like being Jan-Paul studying in Cape Town? And did you imagine that you'd someday end up in a place like New York City, halfway around the globe?
You really want to know the truth. Before I got this job here in the US, America, or the United States of America, was not on my top 20 list because all I knew about the country was that what I learned from LA law and all of those stories about crime. So I really did not put America very high up on my list. But since I've come here, I know one has to live in New York City at least once in your life.
That's
And
right.
I'm very happy that the universe made that happen for me.
Well, let's talk about the universe's mechanisms a little bit. First of all, how fascinating to know that that's the image that the U.S. is sending out about New York and about itself. Where did you want to live if you had the choice of living anywhere when you were growing up in South Africa, or did you want to stay there your whole life?
Yeah, if somebody had asked me 6 months before I came to the US whether I would want to live elsewhere, I would have said elsewhere. I'm in Cape Town, and Cape Town is actually on the top 5 list of most beautiful cities.
Mm-hmm.
But there's much more to life than just looking at beautiful mountains and beautiful oceans, having all your friends there.
Mm-hmm.
You make me think back at, and that's why I visit regularly. My parents are still there, and obviously I have wonderful friends there, wonderful memories. But I feel happy, I feel comfortable after I've spent 2 nights in a place. That's who I am as well. I'm adaptable.
A good skill, especially for a Toastmaster. And it's one of the skills I'm sure Toastmasters has elevated even further. Jan Paul, talk to me a little bit about your background as a young man in South Africa from a career perspective or from an educational perspective. Were you always interested in finance? Were you someone who sort of fell into it? Did you have a family history of that? Or did it just sort of pop out of the box one day?
Actually, how this happened, how I got into insurance was I was in the military. I was in the Navy in South Africa. We had to do military service at the time, but I enjoyed going into the Navy, spending some time there in uniform, learning. That's where you really learn to get to know people from all walks of life. And you get around. I did some service in the middle of Africa. Imagine me, with a rifle, walking around there on patrol, and the next morning when you wake up, you actually see that you slept on a scorpion. That's one of the things that I experienced. And also, just a couple of 100 yards away, elephant were passing by, about 120 elephants that I could count. You see, I was already in math at that time.
Let's talk about this a little bit more. What position exactly did you have in the military? And do they branch up the military like they do in the U.S., or is it different than us somehow? And if so, what branch were you in?
Yes, I was in the Navy. I was in communications. So we had sparkers and bunters, so people who can do Morse code and things like that.
Wow.
I can still say Morse code in my sleep. And I learned to type in the Navy as well. So something which is very useful, even up to today.
I bet. How did you end up outside of the military sending you there? How did you end up in Central Africa, and what sort of mission were you on? What country were you even in?
Well, part of it is probably still classified. But
Gotcha.
South Africa was somewhere on a mission, and I was part of that group of people. I was helping the Marines. So as a naval person, I was helping the Marines, and I got to experience not shaving, not washing for 9 days. That's the maximum that I went without washing at all, because water there wasn't that, you wouldn't use it just to clean up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's actually particularly interesting to hear for those of us who are Toastmasters in the district, all of whom know you and might not imagine that as being part of your background. Talk to us a little bit about what, if anything, you learned from that experience.
I learned that I can do anything that I set my mind to. There were some dangerous situations, of course, but to stay calm, to think about what you have to do, to have a checklist to extent, what I remember that is specifically a learning point of what I achieved there was that one day somebody was shot, and I had to coordinate the evacuation of the person. That meant staying calm, communicating with everybody, making sure they understood what the mission was, and specifically making sure that the people for whom it mattered most, namely the injured person, was evacuated. So those are, and I think there are many things, maybe not that crucial, not that life-threatening, but there are many things in life that one must just think about staying calm. What are the priorities? Don't try to blame anyone. Think about what you've learned. You fall back onto your training. Trust other people. So I think that's a lesson that I learned back then that I still apply today.
Jan Paul, I've just got to ask, what are some tips for staying calm that you might be able to throw out there for those of us that tend to get into a frenzy, particularly over nothing, who might not have ever had the opportunity to learn it in the way that you had to, let alone apply it?
Well, I think, number one, you probably should trust yourself. Think about the experience that you already have. Think about the success stories that you've had, and therefore don't doubt yourself. Secondly, when such a situation comes, that's a time to show what you're capable of. So step up at that point in time. Go for it. Because if you wait too long and wait for other people's permission or for other people to act, and something is really crucial, then it might be too late. So I think it's that balance of knowing when to step out, when to maybe step across the line that would be there ordinarily. And there's this general statement about asking for permission versus asking for forgiveness. I think if you do things for the right reason,
yes,
you know kind of the constraints, you know what you're allowed to do, but also what the situation asks for.
Yes. Then
you should step up, and you can, even though it's not on my resume, it's something, yes, I carry that with me. And you kind of tease that out now.
Yeah, that's what this is all about. Amazing. One other thing that I just have to know. Did that scorpion sting you? Tell us, please.
No, he did not.
Oh,
no.
Good.
I survived.
Did it survive?
Yes, it actually walked away. Slowly, it kind of spread its legs and walked away, yes.
So, you were somewhere else before you came to New York. Talk to us a little bit through the next step of your journey.
Yeah, so my first place in the U.S. where I lived was in Philadelphia. I worked in Wilmington, Delaware, just south of Philadelphia, but the place, my apartment and my house was in Philadelphia. A wonderful city, a city where I owned my first brownstone. And for people in New York, they might say, wow, Jan Paul owned a brownstone. But in Philadelphia, things are 10 times cheaper. Yeah. No, New York brownstones, they are for the rich. In Philadelphia, it's much more affordable.
Now, for those who might be listening or watching, who are familiar with Philadelphia, again, they're going to die to know, what part of Philadelphia were you in?
Okay, I was in Center City.
Oh.
At 20th and Arch, around there, on wonderful Apple Tree Street. It's a short street with, all our neighbors, we know each other. And there's a diner on the corner. I'll tell you how I found this place. It was a place that needed a lot of renovation. And I had told my realtor, I don't want a place that needs any work. So after the third time, when she'd taken me to something that really didn't make sense based on my requirements, because I said, I want a place that has parking. I want a place that doesn't require any work done. She took me to that place. No parking. It was a mess. Students had lived there for 10 years and nobody had cleaned up, and they had split it up into different smaller bedrooms. So it was maybe a place for 10 students. Not a place you want to live in if you have, if you're just two people in the house. So after I almost fired her, I said, wait a minute. If I can get this place for a good price, then I'll do it. And deep down inside, maybe that's what I should have done. We spoke about the universe putting things.
Absolutely.
I actually love doing interior decorating or renovations. Even when I was young, I designed extensions to my parents' house. I designed the
really
walls and things like that. Every time I'm looking for an excuse. So this happened also in Philadelphia, even though I had not planned that. And yes, the rest is history. I had a wonderful 7 years there, living in a beautiful place that was renovated. I lived through it, living while they were hammering away, things like that.
Which I'm sure could not have been pleasant. What was more chaotic, living in a building that was undergoing renovation or moving to New York City?
Moving to New York City was actually quite under control.
Oh?
Yeah, because I decided that for the first year, I was not going to move all my stuff. It would go into storage and just live in a couple of places, getting to know where I would like to live. And what I looked up first when I heard I had this opportunity to work in New York City? I looked up where the Trader Joe's were. Because
well, were you disappointed with the answer at the time?
No, well, at the time there were only 4.
Yeah,
and I'm not too far from a Trader Joe today, so I'm happy where I am.
And what neighborhood did you end up in when you first came here?
Well, I lived in Jersey City.
Oh,
but not in the apartments, in kind of a house. Kind of like real Jersey City people. And then I lived in Inwood, which is in the kind of upper west side of New York.
Yes.
And now I'm in Hell's Kitchen.
Well, let me just ask you, Inwood, that's one of those places people kind of know where it is, but they mostly know it through like the traffic reports or the maps that they see. How'd you like living there? And how did it compare to living in Hell's Kitchen, particularly? How long have you been in Hell's Kitchen?
I've been here since 2012, so 8 years now.
Yeah, so it's changed a little bit in that time. Is that not correct?
Yeah, well, Inwood is where you have, it's kind of a mixture. It is a very strong Latino area. So many people around there can only speak Spanish. And it was wonderful to go to the restaurants there. People play games outside. So I felt like I was somewhat of a tourist, but I still lived there.
Yeah.
Which was a wonderful way to get to know that part of the city. And Hell's Kitchen is kind of a mixture. It's between where tourists are in Times Square and then where normal people live and go on 9th Avenue. So I prefer the 9th Avenue non-tourist part of it.
You are a true New Yorker if you are referring to tourists as non-normal people. I respect that, Jan Paul. How did you end up in Toastmasters? Tell us.
Good question. I joined Toastmasters because my boss had suggested I join. But
whoa,
some of you...
What's the story?
Some of you have heard this before, where I said I did not take that as a compliment. But I actually am very happy that I ended up in Toastmasters because it has changed my life, and I've seen so many other people's lives changed. And that has kept me in Toastmasters.
It's funny because sometimes bosses that we all might have make suggestions that we get involved in certain courses of study or do certain things that can be taken as a compliment, but really they present such rich opportunities. How exactly did it come to be that your boss told you that?
Yes. Okay. Let me be honest, transparent, vulnerable.
Yes. That's how we connect with each other. And that's what we say in Toastmasters. I love it.
Yes, yes. So I work with numbers. As you said at the beginning, it's international capital management, which means I work with many different sets of numbers. But when I talked about numbers, notice the past tense. When I talked about those numbers, I would bring the whole encyclopedia with me to make sure that everybody understood exactly what those numbers meant. Instead of summarizing them, instead of taking the audience into account. Where have you heard that before? In Toastmasters, right? So my boss actually said, I can trust your numbers, but when I take you with me to a meeting, you lose the audience. And the rest is kind of history, because I think I've improved, and especially my emails have improved. I think I'm more to the point, structured, like one would write a speech.
That is fascinating. And I have to say, in all of the conversations that I've had about Toastmasters over the years, and all of the talking points that I've heard Toastmasters throw out to the world about its many benefits, improved email writing is one I've never heard. But that's actually a powerful point. That's such a dominant form of business communication, even with the emergence of text and DMs and all of these other ways of communicating. The hardcore stuff still goes through email. Yes,
it's very true. Whenever we communicate with people in whatever form, we have to make sure it's fit for purpose. And that maybe sounds too generic, but I think the things that we hear when we do speeches in Toastmasters, we can apply in other ways too.
Tell us about your first Toastmasters meeting.
My first Toastmasters club, and I don't really know what the term home club nowadays means for me, because I'm a member of many, many clubs. 6. I think the podcast club is now number 7. But my very first club, and I'm still a member of them, very active, was Pride Toastmasters. And I walked in there, and for all the Toastmasters, you might laugh and say, did Jan Paul really experience his first Toastmasters meetings like this? I was afraid. I hid in the back of the room for 3 times. I didn't want to be recognized, to be called for table topics, because I thought the people that went to the front had been given the question before the time. They were so impressive. I felt intimidated.
Wow.
And so only after the 4th time that I attended did I raise my hand, after somebody had told me, had corrected my understanding that table topics is truly impromptu.
Amazing. What was your first speech about?
My first speech was about my coming out process. I'm gay, and I shared that story. I shared the story how I told my mom for the first time, but after I tried 3 or 4 times to tell her, and then the 4th time, and months had gone between those different times that I tried to tell her that. So this time we were in a restaurant, and we had already finished the dessert, and I still hadn't told her.
Mm.
So I went to the restroom, washed my face, and I said, "Are you ever going to tell her? What's going to be different next time?" And so I had kind of made up my mind, but I was still not 100% prepared. And I then walked back to the table, and she said, as they were bringing the check, she said, "So tell me about your girlfriend." And I said, I touched her hand and I said, "Mom, actually, I am not straight. I am," and I said at the time, in my mathematical background, "I am less or equal than bi." One way of explaining that I'm not straight.
Did she understand what you meant?
She did, yes. So we spoke a bit more, and then we went home. I was visiting my parents, and she said, "I'm, of course, not keeping this a secret from your dad." And I went, so she went to look for my dad, and she told him, and he came, and he just hugged me. He called my name, and he just sat there. And yeah, it wasn't that easy for them. Of course, coming out for me wasn't easy.
Yeah.
But for parents, it's not easy to come out, because suddenly they are now parents of a gay son.
Yes.
And in the past, they've not had to come out as that. I was just their unmarried son.
Right. Jan Paul, how old were you when you came out to your folks?
I was in my 30s.
And they were and are still living in South Africa. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Culturally, what was the vibe that coming out might bring someone into in South Africa when you came out?
Well, at the time, there wasn't marriage equality in South Africa, but it actually came about in 1996, so which was much earlier than here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So the Constitution actually at the time was required. We got a new Constitution, and that required that there would be no distinction between gay marriage and straight marriage. But that's legal. But I think people everywhere have some difficulty in coming out. You're in the minority. You see examples of more people are straight, of course, and people have dreams, their own dreams, their own. People see what a princess is looking for, a prince charming.
Yes,
things like that. But I'm very happy that I can be out, can be myself, and I think to get it back to Toastmasters, I think if one is authentic, then one communicates better. If you are hiding something, then people sense that. Or if you are pretending,
yes.
then that's kind of obvious. Even if
Yes.
you don't say something, it's kind of obvious by the things that you leave out.
Do you feel that Toastmasters can help people learn how to be more authentic then?
Very much so. If you were to ask me what is a tagline for Toastmasters, and I know we say it's where leaders are made, or you build confidence, all of those very true, but finding your own voice.
Mm-hmm.
That is what Toastmasters will do for everyone, because in the workplace, speaking up, what you can how you can contribute, being a good listener, so being empathic, helping people, and also just being comfortable in your own skin to be socially interactive with people. I think Toastmasters is wonderful. It's a kind of the best kept secret. We shouldn't keep it a secret. We should all talk about it whenever we can and bring in more people into Toastmasters. We should make sure that our clubs are conducive and positive learning experiences. And this past year, as the program quality director, and even before, I've attended so many club meetings, and all of them are unique. Every club is different, but they're all so warm and welcoming. And I can just see how it benefits people.
So your boss, was she happy with the outcomes of your Toastmaster experience? Did she get what she wanted from you?
Well, I think I'm still a work in progress. I've changed bosses since then, but I'm sure they appreciate that what I can bring to the table now, probably more than before. Yes.
Tell us the most inspiring Toastmaster story that you have seen or heard about, especially being a member of so many clubs. You have to have heard a story or two, or maybe you're that story yourself.
Yeah, I think I am one of those stories, but what keeps on inspiring me, what's feeding my passion, is seeing other people and how they grow in front of my eyes. I remember a person in our corporate club who everybody thought wouldn't even step up as a Toastmaster of the day because she was very shy and her job didn't require her to interact with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But one day she did the job and she rose to the occasion. She was wonderful. Today, she's a project manager. And she is checking in on people. She is talking to people much more her senior, getting things done. She is one of those examples in the corporate world. Another example, which kept me elated for 48 hours and longer. It's still actually feeding me when I have to think about motivating others to join Toastmasters. It's one of our clubs in a university club. I think I can say Fordham University. And one of the members there told me that she raised her hand in class for the first time after having been in Toastmasters for 6 months. So I thought, wow, life-changing for her.
Yeah.
Before Toastmasters, she would not have been able to get one question answered. She wouldn't have qualified for being called for an interview, let alone now having a green card, and all because of Toastmasters. All because of her, as I said before, finding her voice.
Yeah, that is amazing. Let's quickly give a quick shout out to all of the clubs that you're a member of?
Okay, I already mentioned Pride Toastmaster, but Leadership Roundtable is a club that used to meet around the table, where food was brought in by waiters. So you learned how to operate and give speeches while your audience and yourself might be distracted.
Wow!
Can you please pass the salt? Is this yours? Is this your salad? Those types of things. Wonderful club. My corporate club, Met NYC, great club as well, strong club. You gave a shout out to them before.
Yes.
And then I'm a member of Jade Toastmasters. It's a Chinese English bilingual club. My Chinese is very limited. I bring in the bilingual there for sure. But I have told people about my trip to Washington in Chinese. Then I'm a member of another bilingual club, the French Bilingual Club. Bonjour, bonsoir, depending on what time. I learned French in high school. And since then, I've only practiced when I bumped into tourists here or maybe a trip to France. But this is a warm, welcoming place where people can practice their French in a welcoming atmosphere. Yes, I'm sure I'm leaving out another club, but I'm a member of Virtual Parliamentarians. It's a club where we learn how to apply Robert's rules. Robert's rules are formal meeting rules. It's like proposing a motion, voting on a motion, things like that. And we do table topics in that format.
Wow.
You might think it's very, very dry, but it's so much fun.
Wow.
You're learning all the time. I told you before, I'm a work in progress. I'm a work in progress when it comes to formal parliamentary procedures. And this is a fun way to learn those.
Do you feel, though, and I am asking this on the behalf of the audience, do you feel that that is something that has actual application in the world for the majority of people who might be starting out in their career or might be in any number of different professional situations? Or is that sort of like model United Nations, where you pretend to be a delegate to the United Nations, but let's face it, most of us don't end up diplomats?
Oh, that's a very good question. I think it has lots of applications. In addition to the formal Toastmasters meetings that we have to have, many of us are members of, say, the Parent Teachers Association or NGOs, or we might have our own companies that have to have shareholder meetings.
Yes.
So it does make sense to know a little bit more about what a fair meeting is, how you make sure that people's voices are heard, and how you ultimately make decisions. So it is, the book itself is very thick. I haven't read it yet, but I'm fascinated by my exposure so far to this, because it's just fun how to ultimately vote on whether we should have apples or pears as the fruit of the month.
You could have just been a member of a zillion clubs and had a ball doing that, but something made you decide to move up further within the Toastmasters organization itself. Till now, you are about to become the head of an entire district that has clubs which have countless members involved in them. What made you decide to take that first step? And what made you decide to keep moving?
I never planned this journey. And every step, I didn't plan the next step. Getting an opportunity to lead or to have some kind of a different role outside of your club, I found to be very rewarding. You learn a lot. You get stretched a lot. It really showed me where my comfort zone ended and how I could push it. I mean, imagine going to a club that you don't know at all, right? It's a completely different audience.
Yes.
It could be either a community club where people don't know you at all, and you have to be connect with them.
Yes.
Or a corporate club that you would ordinarily not be allowed into that world, and you have to add value. So I love the idea of that challenge. That was the first one, the area director role of doing that. Actually, my very first role outside was when I was asked to be a timer at the area contest outside of, and shout out to Times Toastmasters. It was held at New York Times Toastmasters.
Oh, I love it. And, timers, is particularly at the contest level, is actually a fairly stressful job. Because there's a lot that's dependent on that. If you make a mistake, someone can get disqualified and their whole dream trajectory for participation in the contest, their whole confidence, a whole host of things could be impacted by that. So it's actually not something that I take all that lightly, and I understand why you wouldn't take it that lightly either, or perceive it as a real leadership role or a role of some consequence.
Yeah, I believe that everything that we do, we have to do well, unless you decide to just relax. Well, maybe even that you have to do well, because we all need to be reinvigorated. So we have to do something else intense after we've done the right things intensely. But yes, that's what I love about Toastmasters. All the experienced Toastmasters, people who've done all the district and maybe even international and regional roles already, they continue to be involved. They keep on giving back. So they are the inspiration to me now, because all of them are willing to do all the roles.
Yeah.
That's what Toastmasters, there is a hierarchy, but actually there is also no hierarchy, because everybody, once you're in a club meeting, then the Toastmaster of the day is in charge. And the timer can be anybody with any title, any experience. So I love it. And also doing your job well every time is a gift you can give. It's a respect to the audience, respect to the speaker.
Jan Paul, have you begun to develop a vision for District 46?
This interview happens kind of at a difficult time, because I will have to discuss all of that with the other district leaders. I want to make sure that it's our vision, that we all own it, that they will feel that that they would want to spend their time, their energy, maybe late nights or early mornings, on achieving it. But I don't want to cop out in terms of my original thoughts. And I'd say build on what we already have. I think I've been part of the trio this year. I think we've built up some great things, some great outputs, some excellent experiences this year. Shout out to all of the PQD team that did a wonderful job this year. So when it comes to next year, I think we want to build on that. And I want to make sure that everybody feels that they get at least one step better. A club that in the past didn't have any goals, 1 or 2 goals will be great, will be an excellent achievement. A club where And I hope there aren't that many clubs by the time I look at the list again. But a club that doesn't have all of their members enrolled in Pathways, the educational program, everybody should be actively participating in the educational program. So I want people to feel comfortable to have caring conversations. So I know we've used the word uncomfortable conversations where both parties are uncomfortable, but
Yes.
I think we come from an angle where we look at a conversation where we care about the other person. In other words, where we want to share, we say it's not, and none of us get paid, we don't get commission. But the fact that I'm telling you about Toastmasters, why you should join, or my experience in Toastmasters, and I think you will benefit, that's a type of caring conversation that we should have. The fact that not everybody renews in clubs, we should reach out to those people in a caring way because we miss them. We know that they can benefit.
Yes.
And an area director, a division director that visits a club, they're not going through the motions just to check a box.
Yes.
The idea is that they have a caring conversation, which might be outside of their comfort zone. But that's also part of what Toastmasters is about, to grow and learn. And hopefully we can help each other in that process to have that caring conversation. So I hope we can have those conversations so that everybody in the district, that all clubs benefit from more members. The district will benefit by being stronger, but most importantly, all the members, and especially the new members who don't even know about Toastmasters yet, will say yes to a caring conversation when somebody invites them in.
I love that conception of a caring conversation as opposed to a difficult conversation, or how I heard it framed when I was in large organizational life. I'm going to have a hard conversation with you. When I heard that, I somehow didn't feel cared for. But a caring conversation really does set a positive tone. It also frames the mindset of the speaker, of the person who is leading the caring conversation. Jan Paul, tell us about one leader and one speaker who you admire.
A leader, I think two people for different, I think Nelson Mandela as a leader is from South Africa, of course. At the time when he could have made a decision of continuing a difficult time, a problematic time, or getting revenge, he chose to build. And unfortunately, he was only the president for 5 years. But I think during that time, he showed that he was a man of character. A speaker who's also a leader, I would say, is President Obama. And I won't go into details about kind of his politics, or even how he conducted himself during the time. But I think what I like about him is he's so intellectual. I love it when people are logical, when it makes sense, when you can see he applied his mind to something, and you can understand where he's coming from. So I thought you were going to ask me a question about who would I invite to dinner, and that's the only question I prepared. Actually, it was going to be President Obama, because I think I'm going to ask him which of his decisions had been the most difficult, because it's clearly not easy. It's not clear cut everything.
You just demonstrated, by the way, a tremendous skill that all Toastmasters learn through table topics. And for folks who are not members, who may be watching or listening and wondering what is table topics? Table topics is what Jan Paul mentioned earlier. It is when you are asked a random question and you have to stand up there and answer. And one of the tricks of the trade, I'm totally busting out a Toastmaster secret here, is that you don't have to directly answer the question. You can just say any old thing, and you can change the topic if you want to. And you just did that brilliantly, Jan Paul. Now there are no Toastmaster secrets anymore. You just thrown them all out there. So I'm going to have to change the subject on you. Your LinkedIn recs. I looked at them, and one was from one of your professors. One was from, I believe, someone who managed you. There may have been another one in there as well. One of the things that I noticed when looking at those recommendations was, well, first of all, that they all used in one way or another language describing your brilliance. They particularly talked about the facility of your mind, but they also talked about your true commitment to growing and improving and becoming a better person. I believe one of your professors said something like he didn't get his MBA just to have another certificate, but because he really wanted to learn and grow. Jan Paul, why are you such a believer in personal transformation?
That's a summary I haven't heard yet, but yes, I like to learn. I like to see how I can apply things. Now, it doesn't mean that I automatically remember everything or integrate everything in my life, but I think there's so many different theories out there, or there's so many difficult problems to solve in the world that to think about them is at least one way to try to help. And kind of one problem at a time. I think you asked me earlier on, how can one stay calm? That's what I learned from one of my bosses. One of my first bosses, I was sitting in front of his desk. He was in a closed office. I was sitting at my cubicle, and I always overheard him talk to a wide variety of people. And every time he just focused on them. Mm-hmm. He was not distracted. He paid attention. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's what I like about that. So try to not be distracted. Try to look somebody in the eye and to bring your best out there. It sounds like I kind of adapted all the kind of the positive things from others. But the reason why I'm interested in learning is because I still have to learn, or I want to solve a problem, or I realize that there are two people involved, or at least two people, and it's also a person on the other side. So how do you deal with another person? How do you come to a solution or an understanding that makes sense? It's, I mean, I make mistakes. I don't want to, and I still have to learn a lot. And maybe I've not learned all the lessons. I'm sure I've not learned all the lessons in life. This interview is kind of somewhat difficult because the moment I hear it, it's out there, and it reminds me of who I also am, or maybe was. That I feel everything is connected and everything has a context.
Yes.
So one has to, if you just say one sentence, you actually have to have a paragraph to explain that sentence.
Yeah.
And that's why I like to connect with people, build a relationship. Just walking in and obviously sometimes one has to do that. You have to make a first impression, always, but you have to make sometimes to be effective, you need to get to know people.
Yeah.
And they have to get to know you.
Yeah. Jan Paul, it has been great having you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. For those of you who are listening or watching, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review or comment. And don't forget to follow District 46 on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And if you're new to Toastmasters, check out Toastmasters46.org. That's Toastmasters46.org to learn more about us or to visit one of our clubs. Toastmasters is where leaders are made.
Thank you so much for joining us on Transformational Pathways. If you enjoyed today's episode or got anything out of it, please rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're interested in learning more about Toastmasters District 46, check out the link in the show notes below.